Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This video involves personal opinion. It does not mean that these opinions are correct, but I hope to share with you what I've seen and felt. Today I want to talk to you about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on mass incarceration in the United States. Since my target audience are ordinary people who live in the United States, including those foreigners who are not familiar with American cultures and US mass incarceration, there are some concepts I would like to briefly introduce to you first. First, what is mass incarceration? Let's look at what Google says. It refers to the fact that the United States is the leading country in incarceration and prison populations. United States incarcerate more than 2 million people. Our population makes up less than 5% of the world's population, but our inmates make up nearly 25% of the world's inmate population. In fact, since 1972, the number of incarcerated people in the United States had soared dramatically until 2009. But the total number is still surprisingly high. Let's look at the data graph to see it more straightforwardly. So, does the COVID-19 pandemic has an impact on mass incarceration in the United States? Is there any virus intrusion in such a closed space, like a prison? What have really happened to the prisoners? In fact, the environment itself of most prisons in the US is not good. The population density is very high. There is a shortage of anti-pandemic materials at the start of the pandemic. Prison managers do not pay attention to the virus. So once there is a positive in the prison, virus will spread quickly. Because the government was unable to evacuate prisoners quickly in early stage of the pandemic, many prisons went through the process of complete lockdown. Let's take a look at a real lockdown story, where the original story is written by the prisoner himself. His name is John Lennon. He's serving an aggregate sentence for 28 years to life at Civilian Correctional Facility in New York for murder, drug sale, and gun possessions. He was a finalist for the 2019 National Magazine Award in Feature Writing. If you are interested in the original story, I've put all the references at the end of the video, including the hyperlinks. In the early days of the pandemic, John was at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York. He said when everyone outside was required to wear masks, more than 1,300 inmates in a prison was not provided with any mask. They either bare their face or use a closed handkerchief. 66 people was diagnosed as positive, and more symptomatic people were not identified as positive because there are no opportunity for testing. John believed that far more than 66 people were actually sick, and he suspected that himself has contracted whole COVID during that time. Because in April, he had no sense of taste, fever, and difficulty breathing. 4 prisoners and 1 officer has died. He said later he was lucky to be transported to the North Civilian. He felt relieved. Because pandemic prevention has begun, everyone began to wear masks and disinfect. And this is the best prison in the past 20 years. There is hot water and sink and small window that can extend 2 hands. From the cell door, he could see the common area downstairs and all the cells on the opposite of 2 floors. Although the environment is very good, everyone cannot go outside due to the lockdown. Here, I have to mention a point. Maybe many of us think of prison as a place to lock people one by one, all day, and never let them out. But not really. In John's description, normal times, prisoners have a lot of activities. Even in maximum security facilities like the one he was in, people can attend programs, exercise, swim mobs, swap pack of cigarette, hustling. But as people started dying of COVID, virus prison shut down these activities. Every day, there will be a mess hall workers leaving a cart with pre-made trays just inside of each block's gate, and then a nurse in protective clothing will get the prisoner's temperature across the iron bars. Prisoners who were active in usual times became passive. They became sleepy, slogging through the day, elbows on their bars, babbling nonsense. John said his neighbor alternated between laughing out at nothing in particular and saying R&B for hours. However, the lockdown is not most terrifying, because the prison soon has 6 people test positive. They got severely sick, that they were transferred into the infirmary. People started to panic because, in their memory, those infected has never left their cell without a mask. Nobody knows why they still got infected even though they have already protected properly. Rumors spread among prisoners. One desperate neighbor shouted, "Somebody is a super spreader," and then that somebody complained, "Why is he being targeted?" It's hard to imagine what kind of hurt those who were locked up have been through. The oppressive atmosphere in the prison, the boredom of being locked up, the pain that no one cares about. Either one would have drove a normal person crazy. And what hits my core is that John felt guilty to be the first group of people who can be vaccinated because he felt sane people like him are less deserved to be vaccinated. As lawyer and human rights advocate Brian Stevenson had written, "We are more than the worst thing we have done. That's the ideal. But yet, the worst thing we've done is part of ourselves too. We are the sum of our deed." I murdered a man. Sometimes I feel that I diminish the value of my own life. I sometimes feel that I am less deserving of vaccine than an innocent person. Finally, on February 20th, the lockdown for John and others reached the end. All prisoners could finally go home and fight against the terrible pandemic with their family's company. That's all for John's lockdown story. I think, although prisoners have once done bad things, but in the era of raging pandemic, it's too inhuman to concentrate and lock them up. Otherwise, countless innocent prison guards and prisoners who should not have died can possibly lose their life. When I didn't know this much, I was once surprised when see on the news that a large number of prisoners are released in various states. I didn't support it, and I couldn't accept it. But now, I support prisoners to stay at home. In this extraordinary time, the government cannot provide them with a safe and normal incarceration. Indeed, letting them go home is a kind of protection for everyone, and I feel like it's the right choice. The good news is, thousands of people on home confinement has reconnected with their families and find gainful employment and have followed the rules. They were not as dangerous to public safety as I previously feared. Finally, the latest news is that the U.S. Justice Department announced it would be not force federal inmates who are sent home due to the coronavirus pandemic to return to the prison once the emergency is lifted. Even though the situation might change, because the pandemic has not completely gone, the news is a great start for all who are incarcerated. Thanks so much for my groupmate suggestion, and thanks so much, Professor Carrie Matthews. Thanks everyone for watching. If you are interested in other prison story in COVID-19, I have put down a link here. Due to the time limit, I'm not able to include it in today's video. If you are interested, comment below, and I will make it in my next video. Please give me a thumb up if you like it.